Hello, my name is Emily Parsons. I am a PhD student from the University of Greenwich and a member of the Internet of Things and Security Centre. Today I will be discussing cybersecurity risk management within the healthcare industry as part of the Horizon 2020 CUREX project. Cyber risk management is the process to identify, assess, and respond to an organization's cyber risk. To manage risk, an organization should recognize the likelihood of occurrence and the impending impacts. Based on this information, an organization could define a level of risk acceptance which shows the organization's goals to show risk tolerance. We focus on the risk management process using NIST Special Publication 800/30, which covers risk framing, assessment, response, and monitoring. This cyber risk management lecture will provide an overview of the healthcare landscape and then move into the discussion of threat actors, and threat actions within this domain. We shall then discuss cybersecurity planning with a focus on policies, standards, procedures, and guidelines that affect the healthcare domain. After this, we talk about cyber risk assessments and the important aspects that should be taken into account within healthcare. Finally, we cover cyber risk control responses. First, we discuss the current healthcare landscape with the integration of technology. The integration of technology into healthcare shows great benefits of cyber-assisted systems with internet-connected equipment and digitized records that allow for flexibleness, ease of use, and an overall important update within patient care. Not only does this benefit patients, but these systems can take pressure off of healthcare services, providing healthcare staff with the necessary aid to ensure their safety and well-being. In light of current events, the pandemic has shown what it is like to have healthcare services at full capacity, a problem domain that many technology inventors will focus on in years to come, with the rise of remote healthcare services where patients can get healthcare treatment from the comfort of their own home. However, there is a problematic side to having this type of technology within healthcare. And this can be seen within the number of cyber attacks, the threats towards various healthcare systems. Attackers may target patient data and vulnerable medical devices. First of all, patient data is often extremely targeted by attackers due to the high value and high payoff that this data contains and provides to an attacker. Many breaches from hospitals, etc., and healthcare services have allowed this type of data to fall into the wrong hands. The Internet of Things has also provided a number of medical smart devices which are also vulnerable due to their heterogeneous and unregulated nature. This is alongside the lack of general security awareness by the people that use them. Not only this, but these type of medical devices are no longer limited to hospitals, but they can be found within homes. Finally, remote healthcare poses an issue as well. While it's comfortable to speak to your doctor from the comfort of your own home, applications and the network transmission of healthcare data must remain secure. So within 2020, we had seen many examples of healthcare-related cyber breaches. Due to the pandemic, there has been a spike in the number of coronavirus-themed cyber attacks using the pandemic to phish targets within healthcare. Within a hospital in Vermont, in October of 2020, a network outage caused staff to be unable to log into their workstations and backups, while in turn this caused hundreds of cancer patients to be denied important chemotherapy sessions. The UMV Health Network estimated that the cyber attack in October will have losses of over $63 million, with every computer system within the area being infected. Within the UK, the NHS has expected and was warned about the potential healthcare-centred attacks due to the pandemic, whereby NHS IT systems vary on age and quality, and this causes concern about the vulnerability of the systems used within this environment. These events show us one big major thing, that it's just the beginning of a wider problem. Technology is improving at a rapid speed, and this means that security needs to improve with it. However, this is not the case. Security is often a side thought to functionality, which is a big problem within IoT. Not only this, but there is a lot more healthcare data than ever before, and all of this data is being created and even digitalized at an extremely fast pace, and this may be to accommodate the shift to online systems and the shift to provide the best care possible. Considering the issues provided by technology within healthcare, within this next section, we discuss the definitions of threat, threat actors, and threat actions, and statistics within the healthcare sector. Considering the issues provided by technology within healthcare, within this section we will discuss the definitions of threat, threat actors, and threat actions, and some statistics within healthcare. So we will first cover some key cyber risk concepts that must be considered when addressing cyber risk. A threat is a potential risk to an asset's loss of value, while a threat actor is an individual behind an event. This could be an external hacker or an insider threat, such as an employee. A threat action is a tactic or action used to affect an asset. Threat actions include such things as installing malware and also influencing human behavior through social engineering. A threat action is an attack, an intentional or unintentional act which can damage or otherwise compromise information and the systems that support it. Finally, a vulnerability is a potential weakness within an asset or a defensive control system. Next, an incident is a security event which compromises an asset's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. This means that a breach is an incident which leads to a confirmed disclosure of data to an unauthorized individual. An exploit is a technique used to compromise a system. Management must be informed about the various threats to an organization, to the organization's people, application, data, and information systems. It is important to understand that while security may be improving, so will attackers. Thus, it is important that risk management is a dynamic process and not static. As an overview, risk management is comprised of three major factors: risk identification, risk assessment, and risk control. The following graphs show a set of threat actions and threat actors behind the breaches. The dataset was collected from Verizon Threat Research Advisory Center's investigators. The cases were presented by Verizon's external collaborators and used publicly disclosed security incidents. According to the report from Verizon, threat actions indicated that hacking occurred with 45% of breaches, which was the highest. This is followed by errors and social attacks with 22% of breaches, and then 17% of breaches were from malware. 8% of the breaches were from misuse by authorized users, and physical actions were present in 4% of breaches. Again, the Verizon report showed that threat actors were behind 70% of breaches performed by external individuals, with organized crime responsible for 55%. Internal individuals were involved within 30% of breaches. 4% of breaches had 4 or more attacker actions, and 1% of breaches were attributed to partner actors and multiple parties. Threat actions can affect information systems, data, and individuals. In the Verizon report, victims only contained 81% of breaches in a single day. Large business victims experienced 72% of breaches, with smaller businesses suffering 28% of breaches. Individual personal data was compromised at 51%. Other commodities show that financially motivated breaches stood at 86%. Web applications were involved in 43% of breaches, 37% of breaches stole or used credentials, and 27% of malware incidences were ransomware based. Finally, 22% of breaches involved some form of phishing. According to the graph of actors over time in breaches, external attackers are noticeably more common than internal attackers. It is assumed that there are always more people on the outside trying to attack an organization rather than the inside. Within the actor motivations graph, financially motivated breaches are the most common, more common than espionage. This is also more common than other motivations such as fun, ideology, and grudge, as the traditional go-to motivations for motion picture hackers. Again, financial happens to be the primary motive for many attacks. A compromised infrastructure within a secondary incident may not be the sole target, but could be used as an approach for a new attack. In other, the top actor motivation for incidents includes criminal forms, underground data, and 5% denotes a service. This service includes such things as hacking, ransomware, distributed denial of service, and spam. Unfortunately, a service might be introduced to an organization's information system. It is observed that internet-facing resources, which are not secure, allow attackers to alter the infrastructure. The top actor categories in breaches show that organized crime is a top category. The typical actors are state-aligned, internal end users and system admins that could make errors, also the unaffiliated. The United Kingdom's National Crime Agency noted that offenders begin to participate in gaming to cheat websites and modding forms to progress into criminal hacking forms without considering the consequences. The Verizon report states that computer data breaches and business email compromise complaints were 85% victim and subject being within the same country and 56% being in the same state, where only 35% were in the same city. This graph indicates action over time within breaches, showing that error was the only action type which was constantly growing in frequency year on year. This shows the fact that people could, and often do, make mistakes which could impact an organization. Physical breaches had remained reasonably level and rare, but misuse, hacking, malware, and social attacks had all diminished subsequently as seen in the graph. Malware had been on a steady and stable decline. Hacking and social breaches benefit from credential theft. There is no need to include malware to maintain persistence. Ransomware did not often result in a confirmed breach except when paired with credential use, which is on the rise. It captures data before encrypting, thereby allowing the actors to threaten and expose data if the ransom is not paid. The top threat action categories in incidents provides an idea of what action variants drive incidence numbers. We can see that denial of service plays a large part, which is followed by phishing, data loss by error, and ransomware. The top threat action varieties in breaches indicated that social engineering, use of stolen credentials, misdelivery, and misconfiguration are within the top 5. In this case, misdelivery is when documents and emails reach unauthorized persons. The top error varieties over time in breaches graph shows that error is common in social breaches and more common than malware. Misconfiguration errors have been on the rise, while publishing errors were on the decline. The decline of publishing errors could be due to the different way that they are considered. Publishing a private document on an organization's infrastructure unintentionally will get labeled as misconfiguration because the system administrator has set the storage to public initially. The top discovery methods in the error breaches graph indicates that security researcher as an external method for discovery was the most common method for an error action breach. Ransomware is categorized as an incident in the Data Breach Investigations Report and not as a breach, even though it is considered a breach in certain industries for reporting purposes, for example within healthcare due to regulatory guidance. Furthermore, malware findings support the tendencies of phishing and attaining credentials with respect to breaches. Malware is a software designed to exploit any electronic device or network. It is a threat action which can be transferred through email, phishing, and direct installation on a system. The variants of malware include virus, worm, spyware, trojans, capture app data, capture store data, downloader, password dumper, and ransomware. In the top malware vectors in breaches, password dumper is among the malware breach variants. The email usually associated with phishing and direct install does not require credentials. Ransomware is the third most common malware breach variety and the second most common malware incident variety. Downloaders follow closely behind ransomware. Hacking is the gaining of unauthorized access to data through activities which could compromise a computer system, mobile device, and network. Motives and legality of actions define a hacker, and there are three different types, namely white, black, and grey. A white hat hacker is called an ethical hacker. Companies and government agencies employ cybersecurity experts to find vulnerabilities within their information systems and networks. The action is legal because permission is granted by the system owners. A black hat hacker happens to be the creator of malware to gain unauthorized access to an information system. The black hat hacker is motivated by financial or personal gain, espionage, fun, or protests. This type of hacker can manipulate, steal, or destroy data found within a system. A grey hat hacker combines the traits of a white hat hacker and a black hat hacker, and also the desire to unravel vulnerabilities in a system or network without permission from the owners. The grey hat hacker can provide findings to the system owners and also request compensation. Hacking can be classified as utilizing stolen or brute-forced credentials, exploiting vulnerabilities, and attacks using backdoors and command and control functionalities. For stolen credentials, hacking is driven by credential theft. Over 80% of breaches within hacking involve brute force or the use of stolen or lost credentials. Exploitation of a vulnerability, such as the SQL injection, is associated with web applications. The use of backdoor or C2 can be related to advanced threats for other difficult campaigns and data exfiltration missions. Human persistence is important. Social engineering is a technique used to gain access to an information system by tricking a victim into providing sensitive and personal credentials, which include passwords. The social threat actions can be perpetuated through websites, emails, phone, or SMS. Types of social engineering threat actions include phishing, pretexting, vishing, tailgating, baiting, and quid pro quo. Phishing is a scam perpetuated through making phone calls or leaving voice messages pretending to be from a trustworthy organization with the sole aim of persuading the individual to release personal information, for example, credit card number and bank details. Phishing is an email campaign designed to make victims reveal sensitive information by either opening an attachment or clicking on a link to a web page. A variant of phishing is spear phishing. Baiting is when a malicious threat actor grants product assurance to lure victims. The actor tends to provide free movie or music downloads to trick an end user into exposing their credentials. Tailgating is also called piggybacking, which allows individual access with improper authentication by following an individual with valid authentication into a restricted area. Quid pro quo is when a threat actor offers assurance and promises proceeds or incentives for valuable information in relation to service. Pretexting is a moral pretext, which is created to attempt and steal victims' private information to commit identity theft. In the Verizon report of 2020, social is broken down into two types of incidents: phishing and pretexting. Social actions arrived via email 96% of the time, or 3% of the time arrived through a website. Financially motivated social engineering keeps increasing year over year. Business email compromises had seen most companies either lose $1,240 or $44,000. US-based business email compromise victims had 99% of money recovered or frozen, where only 9% had recovered nothing. In 2020, the recovery improved slightly, indicating that 52% recovered 99% or more of stolen funds, while only 8% recovered nothing. So assets are the information resources, which include such things as servers, people, user developers, media, kiosks, and networks. An overview of the asset landscape indicates that servers are targeted the most. This is due to the shift of web applications within system interfaces. Kiosks and terminals continue to decline due to the shift in attacker targeting, which is outside of the retail scope. Considering that we've spoken and shown a lot of these statistics, we now cover cybersecurity planning that is important for the healthcare domain. Cybersecurity requires a strategy to safeguard both corporate and individual information systems and provide assurance about cybersecurity from the perspective of a CISO. Planning employs information technology to effectively implement cybersecurity designed for the organization. The diagram highlights the need for policies established by management. This means standards as a specification for compliance, guidelines recommended for compliance, and procedures that are referred to as the step-by-step instructions required to comply. This practice relates to government and regulatory needs within each industry, as well as an organization's documents. Cybersecurity requires a strategy to defend both corporate and individual information systems, and also to provide assurance about cybersecurity from the Chief Information Security Officer (CISO) perspective. The cybersecurity policy is a high-level document showing the vision relating to the cybersecurity goals, needs, scope, and functions of an organization. This is produced and supported by the CISO with the amount of acceptable risk. An organizational security policy is a blueprint for the entire organization's security program. This is a strategic plan for implementing cybersecurity within an organization. A system-specific policy relates to a specific or individual computer system. This policy shows the approved software, hardware, and hardening methods of a specific system. An issue-specific policy relates to a functional aspect, which needs additional detail and more attention. This policy requires a separate policy to be prepared, and this demonstrates in detail the acceptable level of risk and the instructions to follow to reach this level. Standards are compulsory rules designed to realize goals and objectives to senior management. For example, the constant use of email signatures. Guidelines are the practical recommendations to individuals on how to implement specified standards. These are not policy statements. Guidelines may be instructions such as when an email is received from an untrusted or unknown sender, do not open any attachments. Another example is to prohibit the use of USB flash drives or external hard disks. Procedures are the thorough step-by-step instructions to realize an expected aim, for example, carrying out a system backup. An example procedure might be an antivirus installation and configuration steps on a system. Every computer in the company's network must have antivirus software installed and be updated with the newest virus designations. Enterprise cybersecurity policies set out the strategic direction, scope, and quality for cybersecurity activities within an organization. The executive level document is designed and developed in conjunction with senior management such as the Chief Information Officer of an organization. The policy takes care of compliance, whereby it is integral to establish a program to ensure requirements are met, allocate tasks to different organizational components, use specific fines and disciplinary actions. Policy management highlights that policies must be managed and constantly evolve so that they stay up to date. To maintain viability, these policies must have a responsible manager and a schedule of when it will be reviewed, a method to make recommendation for when these reviews occur, a policy issue and revision date, as well as an automated policy management system. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996, HIPAA, is the national standard to protect sensitive patient health information from being disclosed without the patient's consent. HIPAA consists of electronic medical records and safety procedures needed to protect them. This includes the protection of sensitive patient health information from being disclosed without a patient's consent. HIPAA requires that a healthcare practice or organization that accepts card payment should incorporate the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. If there is a breach resulting from a possible attack, this can lead to a fine per account breach and loss of reputation. The HIPAA privacy rule ensures a person's health information is adequately protected in transit and at rest, to offer and establish high-quality healthcare while safeguarding the privacy of public health and well-being. This rule provides standards for the rights of a person's records, ensuring that they understand and control the use of their health information. The organizations and persons are referred to as covered entities. The HIPAA security rule protects a section of information related to the privacy rule. This is the individually identifiable health information relating to an individual where the entity creates, receives, maintains, or transmits in electronic form. This information is called electronic protected health information. The security rule does not apply to PHI transmitted orally or in writing. The HIPAA security rule ensures covered entities should enable the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of all electronic protected health information, detect and safeguard against possible threats to the security of the information, protect against probable and not permitted use or disclosures, verify compliance by personnel of the organization. Healthcare practices include hospitals and organizations that provide any form of medical services. For example, web applications that allow for medical payments. An example of a payment system can be found within the National Health Service. If a radiology unit needs access to x-rays and diagnostic tests to send to a patient, they should not have access to a patient's credit card information. This segments the network, using developed policies to prevent access to data they do not need, and only those with a specified role function can do so. In summary, a healthcare organisation should be HIPAA compliant for protected health information, and they should also be compliant to PCI to accept card payments. This creates a standard level of security with completion of a self-assessment questionnaire by merchants. Finally, they should also have network segmentation. In terms of best security practice, networks should be separated so that cyber breaches can be contained, confining the attack to one area in an attempt to affect fewer people. This also means that workstations should be blocked from external facing websites such as Gmail, Twitter, and Facebook, preventing users from accessing them, as humans happen to be the weakest link within many systems. Workstations should also be provided with high-quality antivirus, so spend the extra fees to implement a quality solution with a state-of-the-art firewall with a security information event management system. A vulnerability risk assessment identifies, quantifies, and prioritizes known vulnerabilities and are stored within an inventory database containing attacks, risks, and threats. These vulnerabilities are stored, tracked, and reported in the vulnerability database. Penetration testing is a method for gaining assurance in the security of an information system by attempting to breach some or all of that system's security while using the same tools and techniques that an adversary might use. It is essential to conduct penetration testing multiple times per year by an approved cybersecurity expert to attempt to disrupt the organization's network to assess measures of security. The education of personnel within an organization must take place, where cybersecurity training and awareness is essential, but not all staff within the organization need a degree and certificate in cybersecurity. Employees should be educated on cybersecurity policies and the best security practices when using a medical device and dealing with healthcare data. Training in cybersecurity provides personnel in an organization with comprehensive information and hands-on teaching, which is designed to perform cybersecurity functions better. An in-house training or an outsourced training program should be conducted. A cybersecurity awareness program happens to be the least frequently implemented yet most beneficial program. It is designed to possess cybersecurity knowledge and understanding to safeguard day-to-day work. The aim is to increase the awareness and care about cybersecurity in the hearts of personnel. The goal of the program should be to offer information on how to prevent phishing emails and malicious attack techniques, to develop principles of improved cybersecurity compliance, to increase the awareness of sensitive data on information systems, to inform personnel of the probable cyber threats, to make sure that procedures are monitored correctly, and to minimize the number of data breaches. We shall now talk about cyber risk assessments. The concept of cyber risk is a form of assessment through which a healthcare organization identifies assets of value that can be compromised by a threat. from external or internal actors and based on the vulnerability present in the asset or information system. Risk varies depending on the exposure level, which is associated with a particular activity. Therefore, in defining risk, we can conclude that the risk is a probability of a threat happening, where an existing vulnerability is exploited. Thus, targeted assets of a certain value are impacted. Risk is dependent on the context in which the risk is being analysed. A risk assessment is the outcome of basic human nature, wherein there is always a need to be in control of the situation. The more the organisation is in control of the future, the better for that organisation, with a strong prediction of where things can go wrong. Risk assessment provides enduring and decisive information for policymakers to monitor and advise on responses to cybersecurity risks. We can assume that a cybersecurity assessment refers to the set of events which are defined, designed and executed to proactively identify what threats and assets are present within the organisation's information system and how they ought to be solved accordingly. These have to be conducted with the time, budget, employees and resource constraints. The cyber risk assessment is the process of identifying, estimating and prioritising risks to organisational operations. The cyber risk assessment approach or methodology outlines the scope definition, nature of the threat, threat actor and actions, the vulnerability identified, scoring risk quantitatively or qualitatively, and lastly, risk response as risk controls, which could either indicate whether a risk should be accepted, avoided, transferred, or mitigated. The cyber risk assessment methodology is a systematic tool for defining metrics, specific processes for continuous risk assessment, and comparing businesses to determine which team or department is better to secure, and to show if the risk posture has improved. The cyber risk assessment is motivated to gain a competitive advantage and reduce reputation damage or any incurring fines or loss of clients. Therefore, to prevent having any negative impact on an organisation from a cyber perspective, a cyber risk assessment should be conducted as a key component of an organisation's risk management process. Executive management lacks interest in cybersecurity, leading to a lack of return in cyber investment. Cyber investment happens to be complicated to solve because of the high degree of uncertainty. A reduction in the cyber risk management budget could lead to a threat, lack of controls, and a severe impact on the organisation. Again, cyber risk assessment is motivated by challenges to tick all the boxes to meet the minimum baseline security checklist. This checklist follows a compliance standard as a generic set of instructions. Risk assessment models considered are NIST Special Publication 800-30, ISO 27005, and Octave. NIST Special Publication 800-30 is designed to conduct risk assessments on an information system in accordance with the NIST recommendations standards. It is used to interpret cyber risk so that executive management can understand. ISO 27005 is designed to support the application of information security using a risk management approach. Octave, Operationally Critical Threat, Asset and Vulnerability Evaluation, is a risk-based strategic assessment and process technique for security. While ISO is used for environments concerning technology and processes. Octave focuses on process environments, whereby stakeholders are interviewed to identify risk in the processes involving data management. NIST is appropriate for conducting risk assessment in a technology environment such as a data center, IT team, and information system. The risk is the likelihood that a threat source will exploit a vulnerability with a severity and/or a predisposed condition with pervasiveness, and initiate the threat event which could lead to an adverse impact on an organization's information system. NIST focuses on identifying the threat from the threat source, the predisposing condition which initiates the threat event. The cyber risk assessment model is transformed into a methodology. The CRA methodology shown begins with a risk frame and then a threat source and threat event, which will exploit a particular vulnerability based on a likelihood of occurrence and an undesirable impact. This then shows the risk score and risk response based on the score. This cyber risk assessment methodology will be discussed in detail. Organizational priorities identify the risk assessment context and determine the purpose of the assessment for a given information system in the healthcare domain. The purpose of the risk assessment is to ensure compliance and to address cybersecurity threats. The scope is a healthcare hospital. The assets within this domain are categorized into people, processes, and technology. These categories support information assets. The information assets are the cyber technologies such as servers, network devices, endpoints, and mobile devices. Security technologies include antivirus, IDS, IPS, and security operations centers. People are found within different teams such as finance, HR, and IT. Data management is processed during many instances as many different types. For example, emails and scan images. The team structure is represented in an organizational chart to show the separation of duties. The assumptions, limitations, and constraints indicate how data will be stored. No data is allowed to the hospital without consent, and this data resides within the hospital, thus is not shared with third parties. Information sources include databases, servers, interviews with individuals to identify risk, vulnerability assessments, and penetration testing. Agree with management on the risk model, analysis, and assessment approach to use. The scale for the risk score needs to be useful and can be quantitative or qualitative. While the qualitative uses a scale of low, medium, and high, the quantitative uses a mathematical formula to get a risk score. Risk response has a criteria such as accept, avoid, transfer, and mitigate risk. A continuous risk assessment by defining a methodology to keep maintaining the risk profile of the hospital. Monitor the environment to ensure consistency in the risk profile. The pre-existing conditions should be covered. For example, a healthcare practice needs to carry a risk assessment based on NIST. NIST Special Publication 800-30 focuses on a threat-based risk assessment. In essence, a threat is whatever could impede or prevent an information system asset from delivering adequate levels of security in terms of confidentiality, integrity, availability, accountability, authenticity, and reliability. The threat-based risk assessment is grouped into adversary and non-adversary threat sources and threat events. The adversary threat source happens to be a malicious attacker who is determined to perform an attack against a healthcare practice. As soon as the threat source is identified, there is a need to determine the intent of the threat actor, what the target is, e.g. a web server with the proficiency tools used to perform a threat such as a Metasploit. understand the capability of the information system architecture. The threat event is attributed to preventing the website from being available, having the original information by the website defacement. Non-adversary threat sources relate to human errors when clicking on emails and PDF documents, and third parties receiving unsolicited information using USB pen drives. The outcome shows a loss of confidentiality data which can be misused by the third party. For instance, when a staff member misplaces a USB pen drive or laptop, confidential data could be lost or sold for monetary gain by a third party. A threat source can affect an asset. A vulnerability can be seen as a weakness of the controls applied to the information systems. Information security procedures which are exploited by a threat source. For example, the lack of separation of duties can affect a critical business operation. In the case of a hospital, support personnel may delete data in the back-end database, which then disrupts the business. We can assume, as an example, that this staff member was distracted because she was entering a critical command and answering a phone call. This and the staff had full privileges with no change in management in place. In this case, a manager should be assigned for such a critical task, who would approve the request and perform the change. The data of patients was lost, patients would be asked to come in again for another scan, and doctors could not make concrete diagnosis for referrals. Vulnerabilities can result from when controls are absent, not efficient, and not responding well to the current risk profile. Perform control testing tasks to identify when controls are present in the information system. If they are present, they are working accordingly as expected based on the risk landscape of the organization. A prevailing condition could either maximize or minimize the likelihood of a threat. Different information systems will respond to controls based on the pre-existing conditions, depending on the known strengths and weaknesses. An asset is an item of value to an organization, and an awareness of an asset's value is always important to determine the potential losses on that asset, whereby a highly valued asset may need to be protected more due to being a valuable target. The organization's information is seen as an asset of value. In relation to the PCI DSS audit, cardholder data becomes a valuable asset. In order to identify processes and efficiency to optimize cost, the asset can be regarded as financial or money, leading to money saving for the organization. The likelihood is the probability that an attack is imminent due to its exposure. The likelihood of a threat action should have numeric values. According to NIST, values such as 0.1 for low, 0.5 for medium, and 1.0 for high should be adopted. If a value is 0, this is inconsequential because there is a zero risk likelihood. This should be unavailable in the asset or vulnerability list. The resulting outcome when a threat and a vulnerability interact with each other is known as an impact. An impact can be direct or indirect. An example of a direct impact is when a hospital observes downtime within operational information systems. For example, a hospital website is down for 5 hours. An example of an indirect impact relates to clients losing trust in the hospital services, which results in them looking for other options from competitors, a damaged reputation, and loss of money. There are many risk formulas to calculate the risk that an organization may choose, depending on the domain of measurement and what needs to be known for the documentation stage. This also means that business and technical conditions must be considered within the methodologies to be suitable for the given domain. Cyber risk formulas stem from the equation risk equals likelihood multiplied by impact. However, it is key to consider all the relevant cyber risk factors within the chosen method. The risk score is a calculated number or score which reflects the severity of a risk resulting from various factors. This means a risk assessment might identify the number of risks with similar scores, such as 65, 74, or 80, or portray them as levels, such as low, medium, or high. The risk describes a combination of the probability of occurrence and an undesired impact, while criticality is the likelihood to access resources, which is a severe vulnerability to identify due to its importance to the organization. We can then calculate the risk score to achieve effective and accurate criticality and a risk rating for cybersecurity vulnerabilities. Therefore, risk estimates the criticality of likelihood by vulnerability scoring, CVSS, with undesired impact, where the CVSS indicates the common vulnerability scoring system. As an example, consider the vulnerabilities of the Address Resolution Protocol, ARP, which maps the network layer and the data link layer. Poisoning is assigned a likelihood of 0.02. The MySQL encoding flaw has a likelihood of 0.09, and the Internet Information Server Privilege escalation to root is given a likelihood of 0.63. Based on the risk score, the risk rating or level for ARP poisoning can be medium-high. The SQL encoding flaw and ISS privilege escalation are ranked high. In this final section, we will discuss cyber risk mitigation. Once the risk assessment has taken place, it is important to ensure that the results are documented so that they can be used to formulate a risk response plan. It is important to ensure that risk assessment results are clear and concise in order to understand the risk profile and select the most suitable controls for each asset at risk. Within the next few slides, we shall talk about the factors of mitigating risk. Risk control involves three basic steps: the selection of control strategies, the justification of these strategies to management, and the implementation, monitoring, and ongoing assessment of any adopted controls. The five strategies are defense, transfer, mitigate, accept, and terminate. Furthermore, consider an example. Allowing staff to work remotely in this pandemic season is a risk, which can be controlled using the various risk response types. Avoid working from home and decide to be in the office. Mitigate and defend risk by applying controls such as a VPN and two-factor authentication, which are appropriate controls to prevent spoofing. Accept risk with a low level by doing nothing. Transfer the risk to a cyber insurance company. By buying cyber insurance, a claim for premium will be paid by the insurance company to prevent a large loss to the organization. The defense risk control strategy attempts to prevent the exploitation of vulnerabilities and is the preferred approach to control risk. There are three common methods: application of policy, education and training, and the application of technology. Organizations may be able to mitigate risk towards an asset by countering the threat it faces or by eliminating its exposure. Another defense strategy is the implementation of security controls and safeguards to deflect attacks on a system, and therefore minimize the probability that an attack will be successful. The transference risk control strategy attempts to shift risk to other assets, other processes, or other organizations. If an organization does not already have high-quality security management and administration experience, it should hire people or firms that provide such expertise. Outsourcing, however, is not without risks. The owner of the information asset, IT management, and the information security team must ensure that the disaster recovery requirements of the outsourcing contract are sufficient and have been met before they are needed. The organisation can also transfer risk to an insurance business if they are unable to accommodate the risk. This is called cyber insurance. In the event of a cyber attack, most cyber insurance policies will cover the first party and third party financial and reputational costs if data or electronic systems have been lost, damaged, stolen, or corrupted. The mitigate control strategy attempts to reduce the impact caused by the exploitation of a vulnerability through planning and preparation. Mitigation starts with the early detection of an attack in progress and a swift, effective, and efficient response. The actions an organization can and perhaps should take while an incident is in progress should be specified in a document called the Incident Response Plan. This plan also enables the organization to take coordinated action that is either predefined and specific or ad hoc and reactive. The most common of the mitigation procedures is the disaster recovery plan. This includes all preparations for the recovery process, strategies to limit losses during a disaster, and the detailed steps to follow in the aftermath. The business continuity plan includes all the necessary steps taken to ensure the continuation of the organization when the disaster's scope or scale exceeds the ability of the disaster recovery plan to restore operations, usually through relocation of critical business functions to an alternative location. The acceptance risk control strategy is the choice to do nothing and to not protect a vulnerability, thus accepting the outcome of its exploitation. The risks far outweigh the benefits with this approach, thus it must be greatly justified. The only industry recognised valid use of this strategy occurs when the organisation has done the following: determined the level of risk, assessed the probability of attack, estimated the potential damage that could occur, performed a thorough cost-benefit analysis, evaluated controls using each appropriate type of feasibility, and decide that the particular function, service, information, or asset does not justify the cost of its protection. The termination risk control strategy directs the organization to avoid those business activities that introduce uncontrollable risks. By terminating the questionable activity, the organization reduces the risk exposure. In cases, this means that a different approach will be needed to avoid certain risky activities which can cause problems, which means that other strategies will need to be used. Cyber risk controls consider three processes: choosing controls, validating the selected control to executive management, and applying, monitoring, and the continuous review of the implemented control. Consider the organizational resources available, such as time and money, before investing in mitigation methods and controls. The healthcare domain should consider all staff, the healthcare environment, and the types of cyber assets in use, such as IoT devices. Human error and actions can make a control system weaker and potentially cause other threats. The actions of the user creates a disconnect between the predicted security of a system and the operational security due to the heterogeneous nature of human action. Consider that a set of healthcare staff have been trained to consider password practice alongside the implementation of a password policy. Staff members may write down their password regardless of what they have learnt for the ease of remembering. A It is key to determine the advantages and disadvantages of specific controls. This means setting the economic and non-economic criteria to aid control selection. The new controls must be justified within the realms of value such as cost, business needs and benefits. Investments may involve time and effort, but must be economically feasible. Thus, the risk investments must suit the needs of the environment and operation. Consider the risk towards information assets, as they can lose value when compromised. The formal decision-making process, which is used to consider the economic feasibility of implementing controls, is called cost-benefit analysis. The biggest issue, and something that should be highly worked on, is the value of information and cyber assets, which include controls, for example, the cost of development or acquisition, training fees, and the cost of maintenance. For some conclusions, healthcare needs robust, tailored risk assessments to aid the decision-making process to find the most suitable controls. Cybersecurity within the healthcare domain is of a high priority. Many lives may be at stake, and important data must be protected under the various standards and guidelines provided. We have talked about the factors of risk with the currently changing landscape within healthcare, channeling the importance of security within this healthcare domain. We have discussed cyber risk management and the key methods that should be used to successfully assess risk, exploring how this can be used to formulate quick response decisions. These are the references for this lecture. I hope you have enjoyed this talk and feel free to email us with any questions. Thank you so much for listening.